Hi, I'm Bombalina. Last Thanksgiving Eve, my parents kicked me out, calling me a burden, after years of paying every bill they had. But that wasn't the real betrayal. The real betrayal was the lies they whispered behind closed doors, lies that drained my savings, stole my name, and crushed every ounce of trust I had left. What really happened to the girl who gave everything, and still wasn't enough? Thanksgiving Eve smelled like burnt ham and desperation the moment I stepped into the house. My hands were still stiff from the cold after my long shift, keys jangling loosely in my numb fingers. The living room looked the same, flickering old Christmas lights strung half-heartedly over the mantel, the scent of something burnt wafting from the kitchen. But the air was different. It was heavy, suffocating, as if the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. Victor stood by the doorway, arms crossed, a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey hanging from his hand. Lenora sat silently on the worn couch, staring blankly at the muted television, the flashing images casting long shadows across her tired face. Devlin, my younger brother, lingered near the stairs, pretending to be engrossed in his phone, but his wide, darting eyes told another story. Before I could even put down my purse, Victor's voice, sharp as shattered glass, cut through the room. "You're a burden, Bambalina. You need to leave. Tonight." For a second, I thought maybe I had misheard him. Maybe the exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But no. Lenora didn't look up. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, hands clenched together, as if she had already made peace with this cruelty long before I walked in. I stood frozen, the cold from outside still clinging to my coat, now seeping deeper into my bones. My throat tightened, but I didn't let a single tear fall. Crying would give them something to mock, something to feed on. "You're serious," I said, my voice steady, almost detached. Victor sneered, taking a sloppy sip from the bottle. "Dead serious. You think you're doing us a favor paying a few bills? Acting like you're some savior? Please, you've overstayed your welcome. Time for you to stand on your own 2 feet." I wanted to laugh in his face. Stand on my own 2 feet? I had been carrying this damn family for years, paying the electric, the water, even putting gas in their ancient car when no one else had 2 nickels to rub together. But now, tonight of all nights, I was the problem. Devlin shifted nervously, opening his mouth like he wanted to say something, anything, but Lenora's sharp shake of the head silenced him. My heart broke a little seeing him wilt under her gaze. Without a word, I turned on my heel and climbed the stairs. My room, always a little too cold, a little too small, greeted me with its usual indifference. I moved mechanically, grabbing my suitcase, shoving clothes and important papers into it. I snatched my laptop, my charger, my birth certificate, the essentials for starting over. Sitting on the bed, laptop balanced on my knees, I logged into every utility account tied to this house. One by one, electricity, water, gas, internet. I removed my payment information. Click, confirm, click, confirm. It felt surgical, clean. As I was zipping my suitcase, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Devlin, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly as he held out a torn piece of paper. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They said, if you leave, you'll destroy this family." I stared at the note, the messy handwriting unmistakably Victor's. It wasn't a plea. It was a guilt trip wrapped in an ultimatum. I folded the paper neatly and tucked it into my coat pocket without reading it again. I knelt down to Devlin's eye level and rested a hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me," I said softly but firmly. "You are not their tool. You're not responsible for their choices. Understand?" He nodded quickly, blinking back tears. I ruffled his hair lightly, a final act of silent rebellion, and stood up. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I descended the stairs. Victor sat smirking at the bottom, as if daring me to say something, to beg. Lenora still wouldn't look at me. I walked past them without a word, the wheels of my suitcase bumping against the cracked linoleum. Victor's final jab followed me out the door. "Good luck out there, princess. Let's see how far you get without us." I didn't dignify it with a response. I stepped out into the biting night air, my breath fogging instantly. The driveway was slick with frost, the old streetlights buzzing faintly above. I loaded my suitcase into my battered sedan, the trunk creaking under the weight of it all. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, I allowed myself one last glance at the house. The windows were dark, except for the faint glow of the TV. No one stood at the door to stop me. No one called my name. Fine. Let it be that way. I pulled out of the driveway, the tires crunching against the frozen gravel. The farther I drove, the lighter I felt, as if every mile put more distance between me and the years of thankless sacrifice I had foolishly labeled as love. The night swallowed my old life whole, but I wasn't ready to drown with it. I didn't remember much of the drive to Yvette's place, just the blur of dark frozen streets and the hollow sound of the heater struggling against the cold. My hands were stiff on the steering wheel, and my mind buzzed with 1,000 unfinished thoughts. By the time I pulled into the cracked parking lot outside her apartment complex, it was well past midnight. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pale, sickly glow. Yvette answered the door in sweatpants and a worn college hoodie, her brown hair pulled into a messy bun. She didn't say much, just stepped aside and opened her arms. No judgment, no questions, just a solid, grounding hug that lasted longer than I realized I needed. "Stay as long as you need," she murmured. Inside, her apartment was small, but warm, cluttered in a cozy kind of way. A lone candle burned on the coffee table, filling the room with the scent of vanilla. I dropped my suitcase by the door, kicked off my shoes, and without wasting a second, pulled my laptop from my bag. The world outside could wait. Tonight, I had work to finish. I sat at her small kitchen table while Yvette disappeared into her bedroom to give me space. I opened the necessary tabs, one by one: electricity, water, gas, internet, Amazon Prime, Netflix, the entire infrastructure I had been quietly financing for years. With every click of remove payment method, a different kind of shackle fell away. Click, cancel, confirm. Done. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't second-guessing. I moved methodically, cutting each tie with the same precision someone might use to disarm a bomb. In a way, that's exactly what I was doing. Dismantling the weapon that had been pointed at me my entire adult life. I had supported them in silence for too long, I whispered under my breath. Now, I'm ending it. Silently. By the time I closed my laptop, the clock on the wall blinked 2:07 a.m. I leaned back, feeling the full weight of exhaustion catch up to me all at once. But under the fatigue, there was something else humming in my veins. Relief. It didn't last long. At 6:13 a.m., my phone buzzed violently on the nightstand next to Yvette's couch where I had crashed. Groggy, I grabbed it, blinking at the sudden flood of notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages. The first voicemail was Victor's voice, slurred with rage. "You selfish brat! The power's out! The internet's dead! What did you do? After everything we gave you, you just walk out? You think you're better than us?" Delete. The second voicemail came from Lenora, her tone a frantic whisper. "Bombalina, please, sweetheart. It's freezing. We can't cook. We can't even watch TV. Just come home. We'll figure it out. You're tearing this family apart." Delete. My fingers hesitated over the third message. Devlin's number. I opened it. "Devlin, Dad's throwing things. He's yelling your name over and over. He smashed the microwave. Mom's crying. Please be careful." I swallowed hard. Not because I was scared for myself. I had already braced for the fallout. But because Devlin was still in that collapsing house of glass and splinters. I texted back quickly. "Stay away from him. Stay upstairs. Lock your door if you have to. I'll figure something out." By 7 a.m., the barrage had escalated. Now Victor wasn't just leaving voicemails, he was sending texts. "Victor, you ungrateful piece of trash." Victor, "You owe us for everything we gave you." Victor, "You think you can just walk away? There's a price for betrayal." Lenora followed with her own desperate messages. "Lenora, please come back. We'll fix it. Your father's just upset." "He didn't mean it." I could practically hear her rehearsed sobs through the screen, the same sobs she used whenever she needed something: money, time, a silent scapegoat. I didn't reply. Instead, I saved every voicemail, every text, every scrap of evidence. If they wanted to escalate this into something bigger, I would be ready. By 8 a.m., after the 15th call in under 2 hours, I blocked their numbers. Sitting alone in the soft gray light of Yvette's kitchen, I stared at the black screen of my phone. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I chose freedom, I said aloud, as if saying it could anchor me to the ground. I won't be dragged back into the fire I escaped. There was no going back, no fixing what had been broken beyond recognition. The blood ties that once felt unbreakable now hung loose around my neck, finally cut clean. As my parents scrambled in chaos, I was finally breathing for the first time in years. The early morning haze hung over the small kitchen like a damp curtain. Yvette had already left for work, and I found myself sitting alone, wrapped in one of her oversized sweaters, a cup of lukewarm coffee forgotten beside me. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional groan of old pipes expanding against the cold. I opened my laptop again, more out of habit than anything else, intending to check emails or scroll mindlessly. Instead, my hand hovered over the folder labeled Documents, Personal. Something pulled me there, an invisible thread tugging at the parts of me still raw and aching. I clicked it open. It was mostly boring paperwork, old insurance forms, scanned receipts, copies of my driver's license and social security card. But as I flipped through the files, one document caught my eye, a credit card statement, dated 3 years ago. My brows furrowed. I didn't recognize the account number. I definitely didn't remember opening a new card around that time. I scrolled through the charges. Grocery stores, gas stations, utility payments, places I knew too well. But it wasn't the list of purchases that made my stomach twist into knots. It was the signature line at the bottom, Lenora Bambolina, my mother's scrawl, sloppy and half-hearted, like she didn't even care if she got caught. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, hoping, stupidly, that maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some explanation, some mix-up. But deep down, I knew better. I cross-referenced the statement against my old bank accounts. Month after month, the payments had come out of my checking account automatically. Small amounts at first, barely noticeable. Then larger ones, creeping higher as time passed, bleeding me dry without my even realizing it. Silent theft disguised as familial need. The realization hit harder than anything Victor had screamed at me. Because this wasn't an explosion fueled by whiskey or pride. This was methodical, calculated, a betrayal that stretched back years. I leaned back in the creaky kitchen chair, closing my eyes, letting the weight of it settle in my chest. Flashbacks surfaced like unwanted ghosts. Lenora smiling sweetly when I offered to help with groceries, brushing my hand away and saying, "You're young, Bombolina. You'll make more money. It's just money. We're family after all." Or Victor barking, "It's your duty. Family sticks together." Whenever I hesitated about covering another unpaid bill, it wasn't help they had wanted. It was control, ownership. I opened another document, an old email thread between Lenora and a credit card company. She had written in my name, posing as me, explaining away late payments, forging my voice as easily as she had forged my trust. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a simmering fury I hadn't allowed myself to fully feel until now. This wasn't just selfishness, this was theft, fraud. And it had been happening under my nose while I worked overtime shifts, skipped dinners with friends, missed vacations, all so they could keep the lights on and the Wi-Fi running. I thought about calling her, thought about screaming down the line, demanding to know how she could do this to me. But what would be the point? Lenora would just cry, play the victim, make it about how hard life had been, how much she had sacrificed. She would spin her web like she always did, trapping me again in threads of guilt and obligation. Not this time. Instead, I took screenshots, saved the statements, forwarded every email to a private folder. I was building a file, not because I wanted revenge, but because I deserved the protection they had always denied me. Sitting there in the soft morning light, I felt something shift inside me, a hardening, a final severance. This time, I whispered into the empty kitchen, my anger will be a weapon, not a weakness. I wasn't the daughter they could gaslight anymore. I wasn't a piggy bank with a heartbeat. I was done pretending that love meant servitude. As the first hints of sunlight crept through the blinds, I packed the documents carefully into a folder and zipped it into my bag. Proof. Armor. The truth burned in my chest, but soon they would feel the fire too. The sun had barely lifted over the city skyline when my phone vibrated sharply on Yvette's kitchen counter, rattling against my coffee mug. I flinched, heart kicking into a faster rhythm, half expecting another barrage of guilt-drenched texts. But this time it wasn't a call. It was a bank alert. Suspicious login attempt detected. Immediate action recommended. I blinked, reading it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining things. The second notification came fast behind the first, 3 failed login attempts from an unknown device. My pulse spiked. I hadn't shared my banking credentials with anyone. No one but me should even know the password. Unless they guessed. Unless someone desperate enough, someone who thought they still had a claim on my life, decided it was time to take what they felt was owed. Victor. It had to be Victor. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my bank's website directly, double-checking everything. Thankfully, no funds had moved yet. No transactions were pending. But the attempts were real, logged neatly in the activity history like footprints left by an intruder. Without hesitation, I enabled multi-factor authentication, changed every password to a random string of letters and symbols, and called the bank's fraud department. I answered their verification questions mechanically, explaining the situation in calm, clipped words. Yes, I believe a family member tried to access my account without permission. Yes, I would like to freeze any unauthorized access immediately. Yes, I want notifications for everything moving forward. When I finally closed the laptop, my hands were steady, but inside a storm churned. This wasn't just emotional blackmail anymore. This was a full-on attack. They wouldn't take another dime from me. Not now. Not ever. I stood up, stretching my tense shoulders. Yvette's tiny kitchen window framed a slice of the morning, a cold, steel-blue sky dotted with thin clouds. The world outside looked ordinary, almost peaceful, in direct contrast to the war zone my life had become. By noon, a new front had opened. It started with a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another, and another. Curiosity gnawed at me, so I finally listened. How could you abandon your parents on Thanksgiving? A voice, my Aunt Carol's, whined. After everything they've done for you? Shame on you, Bambolina. Another voicemail, this time from Uncle Dennis. They're your parents. They're old. They need you. This isn't how a decent daughter behaves. Text messages flooded in too, from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, friends of the family I barely remembered. Blood is thicker than water. You'll regret this when they're gone. What kind of daughter walks away after all the sacrifices made for her? Sacrifices? What sacrifices? My stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with anger. They had no idea what I had given up. They had no clue about the countless bills I had paid, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering why I was never good enough to be seen as more than a convenience. It was all a show. A carefully curated sob story broadcast to anyone willing to listen. I clenched my fists, breathing through the wave of fury. Instead of responding, I blocked each number methodically. One by one, cutting off the noise like pruning dead branches from a tree I no longer intended to save. But I knew I needed to say something publicly. Something to stop the whispers before they grew into rumors too big to ignore. I opened my social media account, hands steady. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I simply wrote, Family does not give them the right to bleed you dry. Family does not excuse betrayal. Love without respect is not love. It's ownership. I choose to be free. Then I logged out without waiting for the fallout. I knew they would twist it, spin it into another weapon to use against me. I didn't care anymore. If they were going to paint me as the villain in their tragic little play, so be it. I would rather be the villain in their story than the victim in my own. Later that night, I sat alone in Yvette's living room, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I allowed myself a small, broken smile. They could rage. They could lie. They could weaponize every ounce of pity they could scrape from the bottom of the barrel. But they couldn't reach me anymore. Every angry call, every manipulative text, every whispered guilt trip only confirmed one thing. I had made the right choice. I was no longer the girl who begged for scraps of affection. I wasn't desperate for crumbs of approval. I wasn't their emotional punching bag or their golden ticket. I was something much more dangerous now. I was free. The more they tried to break me, the stronger I realized I had become. The first rays of dawn hadn't even warmed the frosted sidewalks when a thunderous pounding shook Yvette's front door. I jolted upright from the couch, the blanket sliding to the floor. The knocks came again, harder, faster, followed by the unmistakable bark of Victor's voice. "Bambolina! Open this damn door!" I froze for a heartbeat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Yvette, already moving quickly but quietly, pressed a finger to her lips and reached for her phone. I nodded, edging toward the small peephole. One glance confirmed it. Victor, pacing on the tiny porch, fists clenched, rage practically steaming from his skin. His pickup truck idled noisily behind him, exhaust fumes puffing into the chilly air. "Bambolina!" he shouted again, pounding the wood so hard I worried the flimsy door might give. "You ungrateful little brat! Open up or I swear to God—" I backed away slowly, my breath coming in controlled, deliberate pulls. Yvette spoke quietly into the phone, giving the dispatcher our address and explaining the situation. Her voice stayed calm, measured, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting just feet away. Outside, Victor continued his tirade. "You ruined us. You stole from your own family. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us?" I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. Instead, I sat back down on the couch, pulling the blanket back over my lap, and waited. My silence was louder than any words he could hurl at me. Minutes dragged by in tense silence until flashing red and blue lights painted the walls. A sharp knock, professional, controlled, followed. "Police! Open up!" Yvette opened the door just enough to let the officers in. Two uniformed cops entered, assessing the situation with practiced eyes. Through the still open door, I saw Victor being restrained, his hands waving wildly as he shouted, "She's a thief! She's tearing this family apart!" One officer turned to me. "Ma'am, do you know this man?" I stood up, steady and clear. "Yes, he's my biological father. I have no legal obligation to him. He is here uninvited, making threats." I produced a folder from my bag, containing copies of the restraining warnings I had begun preparing the day after Thanksgiving, anticipating just this moment. The officer took it, scanning quickly. "Understood," he said firmly, turning back to Victor. "Sir, you are trespassing. You need to leave immediately or you will be detained." Victor's face twisted with fury, but seeing the futility, he spat on the ground near the porch and stomped back to his truck. Gravel crunched under his boots. The officers stayed until he drove off, their presence a temporary shield. Once the flashing lights disappeared into the distance, Yvette locked the door, bolting it twice for good measure. I sank back into the couch, my hands still steady, my mind sharp. They would escalate. They already had. But I had escalated too, and I wasn't backing down. That evening, just as I thought the worst of the day was over, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I debated ignoring it, but instinct nudged me otherwise. Against my better judgment, I answered, pressing the phone cautiously to my ear. "Bambolina." It was Lenora, her voice thin, trembling. "Baby, it's me. I'm so sick. I think it's serious this time. The doctors, they said it could be cancer." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "I don't have much time left," she whimpered. "Please, come home. Let's forget all this, before it's too late." It was the same script, different act. The guilt, the fear, the bait wrapped in maternal despair. I remembered all the nights I had rushed to her side at the slightest complaint, paid bills I couldn't afford, canceled plans, sacrificed dreams, all because of cries just like this. Cries that, more often than not, evaporated into thin air the moment I handed over money or signed paperwork. This time, I stayed quiet for a moment longer, letting the full weight of her manipulation sink in. "If you respected me," I said, voice soft but unwavering, "you wouldn't need lies to bring me back." Her sharp intake of breath told me I had hit the mark. Without another word, I ended the call and immediately blocked the number. I stared at the darkened screen for a long time, feeling the old pain claw at the edges of my resolve, trying to find purchase. But it couldn't. Not anymore. Yvette, sitting across the room, offered a silent nod of support. No pity, no lectures, just understanding. I leaned back, allowing the tiredness to finally catch up with me. Next time they crossed a line, it wouldn't end with just warnings. No more compromising, no more second chances, no more pretending. This was war now, and I intended to win. The time for warnings was over. Now I would strike back without hesitation. The silence that followed that night wasn't comforting. It was dense, heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I drifted into a shallow, restless sleep curled up on Yvette's couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. By mid-morning, I forced myself to get up and take a short walk around the block, just to clear my mind. The December air bit into my skin, but the sharp cold kept me awake. It wasn't until I rounded the corner back to the apartment complex that a strange emptiness struck me. I stopped dead on the sidewalk. My car was gone. For a moment, I thought maybe I had parked somewhere else. Maybe Yvette had needed the space. But no, it had been right there, 2 spots from the dumpster. I felt my stomach clench into a tight knot. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't some random theft. Yanking out my phone, I opened the GPS tracker app I'd installed years ago after an old coworker had warned me about car thefts. My pulse pounded in my ears as the little blue dot blinked, sitting exactly outside my parents' house. I stared at it, disbelief giving way to a cold, burning anger. Without a second thought, I called the local non-emergency police line, requesting a civil standby. If they thought they could steal from me and still pretend to hold the moral high ground, they were about to learn how wrong they were. It took 15 minutes for the officers to meet me at the edge of the street. I explained the situation calmly, handing them my vehicle registration with my name clearly printed. One officer, a tall man with a steady voice, nodded and led the way up the cracked driveway. No one answered the door at first. Victor's pickup sat in the driveway like a guard dog, but the curtains were drawn tight. I knew they were inside. They always hid when they were caught. Finally, after the officers knocked loudly 3 more times, Lenora cracked the door open, peering out with wide, fake innocent eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked sweetly. I stepped forward just enough so she could see me standing beside the officers. "Where's my car, Lenora?" Her face flickered, just for a second, before she plastered on that rehearsed confusion. "Oh, sweetheart, you weren't using it. We thought it was fine." The officer beside me cleared his throat, unimpressed. "Ma'am, the vehicle belongs to her. She has proof. We need to resolve this now." Lenora had no choice. She handed over the keys with shaking fingers, mumbling something about how families are supposed to share. I didn't bother replying. I simply got into my car, noting the smell of cigarette smoke clinging to the seats, Victor's signature stench, and the fast food wrappers tossed carelessly on the passenger side. They had treated my property like trash because they thought they owned me. Not anymore. I drove away without looking back. That evening, just as Yvette and I were sharing takeout on her worn couch, a new insult slid under the apartment door. A crumpled envelope, no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold font. "Return what you stole from this family, or face the consequences. You think you're free, but blood doesn't break so easily. You will pay." There was no signature, but there didn't need to be. I recognized Victor's heavy-handed style and Lenora's flair for the dramatic all over it. Yvette looked up sharply as I read it aloud. "That's a threat. You should call the cops again." I nodded, but I was already pulling out my phone. Not to call immediately, but to photograph and save the evidence. Then I slid the letter into the same growing file where I kept screenshots, voicemails, and now, proof of theft. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a case. The next morning, I filed a police report for the theft and harassment. I didn't expect an instant arrest or miraculous justice overnight. But paper trails mattered. Documentation mattered. In a world where the loudest liars often drowned out the truth, I was learning how to speak in a language they couldn't twist. Before lunch, I contacted a local legal aid service and booked an appointment to discuss restraining orders and further action. Sitting across from the intake worker, a kind woman in her 50s who didn't flinch at my story, I laid it all out. Names, dates, Evidence. She nodded grimly. You're doing the right thing, she said. It's going to be a long road, but you're taking the right steps. I left the legal aid office feeling lighter than I had in months, not because the war was over, but because I had finally picked up real weapons. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about justice. They wanted a war? Fine, but they would not like the battlefield I chose. Victory didn't feel like a parade. It felt like waking up to rain battering the windows after a night you thought might kill you, and realizing you were still breathing. I returned to work the next morning with a cautious optimism, determined to rebuild what my family had tried to destroy. I wore my calm like armor, ready to move forward without fear. But before I even finished my first cup of coffee at my desk, the whispers started. It began with glances, co-workers pulling each other aside, exchanging quick, concerned looks. One of them, a woman from accounting who used to chat with me over lunch, avoided my gaze entirely. At first I told myself I was imagining it. Until another coworker, Steve, from IT, accidentally left a printed email on the shared printer tray. It was a forwarded message, unsigned but dripping with venom. Be cautious around Bambolina. Rumor has it she's under investigation for financial misconduct. Stole from her own parents. If she could betray her family, imagine what she might do here. The paper shook in my hands. My throat went dry. It wasn't just some office gossip. It was coordinated, crafted, launched like a missile straight at my credibility. And I knew exactly who had fired it. Victor. The style was unmistakable. Half-truths stretched into ugly caricatures, carefully seeded to inflict maximum doubt and isolation. He had always believed that the loudest story won, and if he couldn't control me, he would make sure no one else trusted me either. Before I could even process the first blow, another one hit. My direct manager, Mr. Andrews, called me into his office. His face was tight, professional, but not unfriendly. Close the door, he said. I obeyed, heart hammering against my ribs. He folded his hands on the desk. We received an anonymous complaint this morning. Allegations of elder abuse and financial exploitation. They didn't provide evidence, just accusations. I inhaled sharply but kept my face composed. And you believe it? He leaned back, studying me. I believe there's always two sides to a story. That's why I'm talking to you first. Thank God for small mercies. I reached into my bag, my hands steady, and pulled out the thick folder I'd been compiling over the past few weeks. Screenshots of threatening texts, saved voicemails, the theft report, proof of every payment made under coercion. I slid it across the desk without a word. He raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't interrupt. Page by page, he flipped through the evidence. I sat in silence, giving him space to absorb it all. When he finished, he closed the folder gently. You don't owe me an explanation, he said finally. But if you'd like to say something for the record. I met his eyes without flinching. I won't be judged by people who only know half the story. I did what I had to survive. I protected myself the way no one else ever did, and I refuse to apologize for that. He nodded slowly. Understood. There was a beat of silence. Then he added, voice low but firm, You're not the first person to survive something like this. And you won't be the last. Relief, raw and staggering, threatened to break through my carefully constructed wall. But I kept it together, just barely. I left his office with my head high. Still, the damage Victor and Lenora tried to inflict couldn't be completely erased. Some co-workers remained wary, some drifted away entirely. And that was fine. Let them go. Better to lose fair-weather friends than keep people around who needed no more than a whisper to turn on me. Later that evening, Yvette and I sat together in her tiny living room, unwinding after our respective workdays. She cracked open a soda and passed it to me without a word. No pep talks, no pity, just quiet solidarity. Anything new from the circus? She asked lightly. I shook my head, feeling a grim kind of satisfaction. They're getting desperate. Because that's what desperation looked like. Smearing, lying, clawing at someone else's life when your own was crumbling. It wasn't strength. It was the frantic thrashing of people who had already lost. As I stared out the window into the deepening dusk, I realized something profound. Their attacks didn't break me. They exposed them. And now, with my career intact, my reputation defended, and my boundaries unshakable, it was time to end this once and for all. Not with anger, not with screaming, but with cold, deliberate action. Their attacks only exposed their desperation. It was time to end this, legally and forever. The next blow didn't come as a surprise. It came in the form of a thick, cream-colored envelope tucked between the usual junk mail at Yvette's place. No return address, no handwriting, just my name typed neatly across the front like a loaded gun aimed straight at my chest. I opened it cautiously, my stomach coiling into tight knots. Inside was a formal letter, one that looked official enough to make my heart stutter before I even registered the words. Victor was threatening to sue me. The claims were outrageous. Emotional distress, theft of familial resources, elder abuse. Attached was a ludicrously fabricated list of supposed debts, charges for groceries I had bought, bills I had paid, gifts I had given willingly but were now twisted into loans I had stolen. At the bottom, a bold statement. Failure to repay the full amount plus emotional damages within 30 days will result in formal legal action. I let the papers fall onto the kitchen table, laughing under my breath. A dry, bitter sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. They were really doing it. They were trying to weaponize the law the same way they had weaponized family, guilt, loyalty. But not this time. This time, I was ready. I called the lawyer I had met at Legal Aid 2 weeks earlier. Within hours, we had a plan. Evidence was key, so I spent the next 2 nights compiling everything meticulously. The threatening voicemails and texts, the incident report I had filed for the theft, screenshots of social media harassment, bank statements showing unauthorized activity, witness statements, including Yvette's, verifying harassment and stalking. By the time we finished, my case wasn't just strong, it was airtight. When the day of the hearing came, I walked into the courthouse wearing the same black blazer I had worn to every job interview, every major life event where I needed to project strength I sometimes didn't feel. Today, the strength was real. Victor was already there, sitting in the hallway outside the courtroom, arms crossed over his chest like a sulking child. He didn't even look at me as I passed. Lenora was conspicuously absent. Whether out of shame or self-preservation, she had abandoned him to fight alone. I stepped into the courtroom with my lawyer by my side and didn't look back. The hearing itself felt surreal. Victor's lawyer, some slick local guy with an overconfident smile, tried to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who had taken advantage of her elderly, struggling parents. But when my lawyer laid out the evidence, documents, recordings, police reports, the smugness drained from their faces. Victor tried to object, tried to sputter some emotional appeal about family values and disrespect, but the judge wasn't buying it. When it was my turn to speak, I stood without trembling. I looked the judge in the eye and said clearly, "Love isn't loyalty when it demands your destruction." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. In the end, the judge granted me a full restraining order. No contact, no harassment, no attempts at communication, direct or indirect. Victor was fined for harassment and malicious litigation. His fabricated claims were dismissed with prejudice, meaning he couldn't file them again. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I had felt in years. Not victorious in the way movies portray it. There was no cheering, no confetti raining down, but victorious in the way that mattered. I was free. Truly free. As I crossed the courthouse parking lot, the sky overhead cracked open with a sudden downpour. I didn't run for cover. I let the rain soak through my clothes, wash over me, rinse off years of guilt and betrayal and lies. Freedom wasn't neat or tidy or easy. It was messy. It was uncomfortable. It was terrifying. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, no one else owned my future. Freedom wasn't given to me. I fought for it. And now, I would learn how to live it. The rain had finally stopped by the time I reached home. Or rather, the place that was slowly, surely becoming home. It wasn't grand. A second-floor walk-up with creaky stairs and a finicky heater. The furniture was mismatched. The curtains were hand-me-downs from Yvette, and the tiny balcony faced a cracked alleyway lined with battered trash cans. But it was mine. Every scuff on the floor, every chipped mug in the cupboard, every faded book stacked on the windowsill, all of it chosen, cleaned, or placed by my own hands. There was no shouting here, no veiled threats hidden behind smiles, no manipulation creeping like smoke through the walls. For the first time in my life, silence didn't mean danger. It meant peace. I started to settle into a new rhythm, slow, cautious, but real. Early mornings sipping lukewarm coffee on the balcony, evenings filling out job applications for promotions, studying online courses Yvette had suggested. On weekends, I'd wander the local farmers market, picking out cheap vegetables and secondhand novels, breathing in the quiet hum of a life finally unhooked from survival mode. It was during one of these weekends, sorting through a box of worn mystery paperbacks at a sidewalk sale, that I got the news. A distant cousin, someone I barely spoke to, messaged me out of the blue. "Hey, heard about your folks. Real shame. Hope you're doing okay." Confused, I messaged back carefully, prying without looking too interested. What came back made my stomach twist, not with fear this time, but a grim, detached pity. Lenora's terminal illness? Fabricated. A sympathy stunt to gather support, but it had backfired. Badly. Once the truth leaked, Victor and Lenora became pariahs, evicted from their rental after failing to pay bills, cut off by the extended family. No friends left to peddle their sob stories to. Just two aging grifters stewing in the ruins of the empire they built on manipulation. There was no glee in the knowledge, no satisfaction, only a hollow, bittersweet ache. They had spent their lives hollowing out the people around them. Now, they were the empty ones. I closed my phone slowly, staring out at the busy street. It was over. Not with fireworks, not with apologies, but with silence, the kind that spoke louder than any scream ever could. Weeks passed. I didn't seek updates. I didn't stalk their social media or pry through gossip. I had a life to build. One evening, as spring began to thaw the edges of winter, my phone buzzed. Devlin. The name lit up my screen like a small flare in the dark. I answered on the second ring, my heart tight in my chest. "Hey," he said, voice rough, uncertain. "Can I come stay with you?" He didn't have to explain. He didn't owe me a speech. I could hear everything in the way his voice cracked just slightly. The exhaustion, the betrayal, the desperate hope. "I packed a bag," he added. "I don't want to be like them." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "I'll come get you," I said simply. By the time I pulled up outside the shabby house, the house that had once been my own prison, Devlin was already waiting on the curb, a battered backpack slung over one shoulder, shoulders squared, jaw set. He climbed into my car without a word, and we didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, I helped him enroll in a local community college. We found him a dorm room with a roommate who didn't ask too many questions. I taught him how to set up a checking account, how to apply for scholarships, how to read a lease before signing anything. One night, after a marathon of cheap pizza and late-night paperwork, he looked at me across the tiny kitchen table and said, "You showed me it's okay to walk away from people who only know how to hurt." I didn't say anything at first. I just nodded, swallowing around the lump in my throat. Because I needed to hear it too. Freedom wasn't about the absence of pain. It was about the presence of choice. A few months later, we sat on a bench at the edge of a local park, watching kids kick around a battered soccer ball under the pink swell of a setting sun. Devlin laughed at something on his phone, a deep, genuine laugh that crinkled his whole face. I hadn't heard him laugh like that since we were kids, before life taught us to tiptoe around landmines disguised as parents. I leaned back, letting the last golden rays warm my face. Healing wasn't clean. It wasn't a straight line. It was messy, jagged, stitched together with scar tissue and stubborn hope. Some days still hurt. Some nights still woke me gasping from nightmares I couldn't quite shake. But they were fewer now. The house I left behind, the people I left behind, were never a home. They were a cage. What I was building now with my own hands, one clumsy brick at a time, that was a home. It wasn't perfect. It didn't have to be. It was real. It was mine. And finally, I was free to live it. If there's one thing my journey taught me, it's this. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, by kindness, by the freedom to be yourself without fear. I spent years believing that love meant sacrifice, that being a good daughter meant losing myself piece by piece. But the truth is, love without respect isn't love at all. You don't owe your soul to anyone just because they share your last name. Freedom isn't easy. It's messy, it's painful, but it's worth every step. If you're standing at the edge of a hard decision, if you're carrying the weight of people who only know how to hurt, please hear me when I say, you are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for protecting your heart. You deserve a life that feels like yours. And if no one has told you today, I'm proud of you. You are stronger than you think. You are allowed to outgrow the people who refuse to grow with you. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic relationship, even if it hurt? What was the hardest part? Or if you're still in that place, what would freedom look like for you? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, type 1 inch in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't love it, that's okay too. Tell me why. I'd love to hear your honest thoughts. Let's build a community where stories heal, not hurt. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want more real, raw stories like this. Stories that remind you, you are never alone. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story.
I never thought a simple phone call could completely change my life, but that's exactly what happened. It was a cool autumn afternoon in Newark, and the leaves were falling gently to the ground. I was enjoying the quiet when I noticed my phone screen light up with an unknown number. At first, I thought about ignoring it. I mean, who answers random calls these days? But something deep inside me told me to pick up. When I did, the voice on the other end froze me in my tracks. It had been years, but I knew immediately who it was. "Anna, it's Christina," she said. Her tone was strange, a mix of politeness and something else I couldn't quite figure out. "Christina," I replied, doing my best to keep my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "What's going on?" It had been years since I'd heard from Christina, my estranged sister. She wasn't calling for a friendly chat. Her next words were a bombshell. "Grandma passed away." I couldn't believe it. Our grandmother, the one constant in our family, was gone. But as I listened to Christina, I realized there was more to her call. Her voice carried an air of smugness that made my skin crawl. "I just wanted to let you know," she added, with a tone that sounded almost mocking. "I'm sure you're busy with your modest life." The words hit me like a slap. I could almost picture her smirking as she said it. But I refused to let her see how much it hurt. "Thank you for letting me know," I replied coolly. "I'll make arrangements to come." It wasn't just her words that hurt. It was the flood of memories they brought back. Growing up, Christina was always the golden child. She had our father's favor, his attention, and a natural charm that made life seem so easy for her. I, on the other hand, was the one in her shadow, always trying to prove myself, but never quite measuring up. Our relationship had been strained for years. The final blow came when she betrayed me in the worst possible way. Brian, my ex-fiancé, the man I thought I'd spend my life with, had left me for Christina. She used her charm, her manipulative ways, and stole him right out of my life. It wasn't just a broken engagement. It was a betrayal that left deep scars. After that, I cut ties not just with her but with the rest of my family. Our father, who had always favored Christina, made it clear where his loyalty lay. My mother, though caring, couldn't bridge the gap between us. So I built my own life far away from the chaos. I married Arthur, a kind and supportive man who works in tech. Together, we built a cozy, love-filled home in the suburbs. Our daughter, Abigail, is the light of our lives. At 5 years old, she's already an artist in the making, sharing her drawings on her popular YouTube channel. While my life may not be flashy, it's rich in love and happiness. But hearing Christina's voice again reminded me of the pain I had worked so hard to leave behind. This phone call wasn't just news about our grandmother. It was the beginning of a storm I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The call from Christina stirred up a storm of emotions I thought I had left behind. The idea of returning to the family home for our grandmother's funeral made my stomach twist. It had been years since I'd been back, and the memories were a bittersweet mix. Grandma had always been the heart of our family, the one person who believed in me no matter what. Her passing felt like the end of something irreplaceable, and now, with Christina's call, it seemed like I was being pulled back into a world I'd worked hard to escape. Over the next few days, I tried to prepare myself for the trip. Packing my bags wasn't the hardest part. It was the emotional baggage I knew I'd be carrying. Seeing Christina again was something I wasn't looking forward to. Her call hadn't just been to inform me of Grandma's death. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. With Christina, there always was. The day of the funeral arrived, and soon I found myself standing in front of the old family home. It looked exactly as I remembered it, and yet something felt different. The house seemed to hold whispers of the past, of our childhood laughter, arguments, dreams, and disappointments. Stepping inside, I was hit by a wave of emotions. The air was thick with grief, nostalgia, and unspoken tension. The rooms were filled with familiar faces. Some wore expressions of sorrow. Others had a guarded look, as if they had come not just to mourn but to observe, judge, or scheme. As I moved through the crowd, I saw her, Christina. She stood near a group of people, effortlessly commanding their attention.
She hadn't changed.
Her charm was still magnetic, and her presence reminded me of the old family dynamics I had tried so hard to escape. I kept my distance at first, unsure of how to approach her, or if I even wanted to. But Christina had other plans. During the ceremony, while people were delivering heartfelt eulogies, she managed to catch me alone. "Anna," she said, smiling in that way she always did, polite but insincere. "It's been a while." I forced a smile. "Yes, it has. How have you been?" "Oh, you know," she said, her voice coated in false sweetness. "Life has been interesting." I could feel the familiar undercurrent in her words, the subtle digs and unspoken rivalry that had never truly disappeared. For a moment, we just stood there, exchanging pleasantries that felt anything but pleasant. It was clear to me then that this wasn't just about saying goodbye to our grandmother. It was about something deeper, about facing the unresolved past. Looking at her, I realized that this reunion wasn't just about mourning. It was about confronting everything I had avoided, the betrayals, the unspoken grievances, and the choices that had shaped who we both had become. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. I knew this encounter would bring revelations that could shake everything I thought I knew about my sister and our family. The days leading up to the funeral were tense, filled with emotions I had tried to bury. I kept busy with Arthur, Abigail, and our everyday life, but no matter how much I tried, I couldn't escape the thought of seeing Christina again. It wasn't just her. It was the whole family I had distanced myself from. Memories of the past were creeping in, and they weren't all happy ones. When the day of the funeral finally came, the atmosphere was thick with sadness and unresolved feelings. The family home, with its faded charm, was crowded with relatives and old friends. The house seemed alive, like it was silently watching over us, holding on to the echoes of our childhood, the laughter, the fights, and the secrets we'd hidden within its walls. As I entered the living room, I felt her presence before I saw her. Christina was there, as poised and confident as ever. Her polished appearance only reminded me of the rivalry that had always existed between us. It wasn't long before she made her way over to me, her smile softer this time, but still edged with something I couldn't quite trust. "I've been meaning to catch up," she said, her voice friendly but with a hint of curiosity. "It's been a while since we talked." I forced a polite smile, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Yes, it has. How have you been?" "Oh, you know," Christina said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Busy but good. I'm sure you've heard from the family how things have been for me." I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure what she was referring to. The last I had heard, Christina was living a glamorous life in Jacksonville, full of success and luxury. At least, that's how the stories went. But I knew better than to believe everything I heard. With Christina, there was always more beneath the surface. During the wake, she made sure everyone knew about her so-called perfect life. She talked endlessly about Jacksonville, her upscale lifestyle, and her achievements. It was clear she was trying to impress, to prove her life was better than mine. I watched her with a mix of irritation and curiosity. Behind her confident facade, I could sense the same lies and manipulations that had defined her for years. She even brought up Brian Adams, my former fiancé, and now her ex-husband. Her casual mentions of him, her attempts to appear unaffected by their failed marriage, felt like she was reopening an old wound. Brian had once been my everything. We had plans, dreams, and a future until Christina, with her charm and cunning, took him away. The betrayal broke me, leaving scars that I thought had healed. Seeing her now, so nonchalant and proud, was a painful reminder of all I had lost. It wasn't just about Brian. It was about all the hurt she had caused. This encounter wasn't just about the funeral. It was forcing me to confront a past I had tried so hard to leave behind. I decided it was time to confront Christina about the past. I had carried the weight of her betrayal for far too long, and I hoped that talking to her might bring me some closure. As the crowd at the funeral began to thin out, I spotted her standing near the living room window. Summoning my courage, I approached her. "Christina, can we talk?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice calm. She turned to me, her expression unreadable at first, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "I need to understand," I began. "Why did you have to take Brian from me? What made you think it was okay to destroy what we had?" For a moment, Christina's cheerful mask dropped, replaced by a colder, more calculating look. "Anna, it's not about taking anything," she replied, her tone sharp. "Brian and I had our own connection. You just didn't see it." Her words stung, but I wasn't going to back down. "You manipulated him," I said, my voice rising with emotion. "You knew how much I loved him. You knew what he meant to me." She shrugged, her indifference infuriating. "Brian made his own choices. You can't blame me for that. Life doesn't wait for anyone, Anna. You need to move on." Her dismissive attitude only made my anger grow. "You never understood, did you?" I said, my voice trembling. "It wasn't just about Brian. It was about everything. You always seemed to have everything handed to you while I was left struggling to prove myself." Her expression hardened, and her voice turned icy. "Don't blame me for your shortcomings," she shot back. "We all have our battles. Maybe if you had been more assertive, things would have turned out differently." Her words felt like knives, cutting into wounds I thought had healed. I wanted to lash out, to yell, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. "This isn't just about Brian," I said quietly. "It's about our family. It's about the way everything always seemed to work in your favor while I was left behind." Before she could respond, a group of distant relatives approached, pulling us apart. The confrontation ended abruptly, leaving everything unresolved. I stepped away, my emotions swirling, and spent the rest of the evening in a daze. Faces blurred together as people offered their condolences, but my thoughts were stuck on Christina and the painful memories she had stirred up. The next day, as the funeral came to a close, I felt a mix of relief and unease. The family dynamics were as complicated as ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. Christina's perfect life was starting to show cracks, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I left the funeral with a heavy heart, but a newfound resolve. The confrontation had opened old wounds, but it had also set the stage for deeper revelations. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. The days that followed were quiet, yet unsettling, as I prepared myself for what was to come. I kept replaying my confrontation with Christina in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family's issues were still deeply rooted and unresolved. My mother's apology, though kind, didn't fix the years of distance and pain. It felt more like a bandage on a wound that needed more than just words to heal. During this chaotic time, Arthur and Abigail became my safe haven. Arthur, with his calm and steady presence, never pressured me to talk about what was troubling me. Instead, he simply stayed by my side, offering quiet support. Abigail, with her youthful energy and curiosity, was my light in the darkness. She poured her heart into her YouTube channel, sharing her artwork with the world. Her joy and excitement were contagious and gave me something positive to focus on. But the calm didn't last long. Christina, ever dramatic, took to social media in an attempt to belittle me. Her posts were filled with sarcasm, painting herself as wildly successful while making veiled jabs about my ordinary life. It was frustrating to see her try to make herself look better at my expense, and it hurt to know she was doing this so publicly. That's when Abigail's YouTube channel became an unexpected tool in this battle. One evening, after seeing a particularly cruel post from Christina, I had an idea. Abigail and I decided to make a video, not to directly confront Christina, but to show the happiness and love in our lives. We created a heartfelt video featuring Abigail's art and moments from our family life. While it seemed innocent on the surface, we included subtle references to Christina's lies. It was our way of standing up for ourselves without stooping to her level. The video took off quickly. Viewers flooded the comments, praising Abigail's talent and the warmth of our family. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots, and the tide began to turn. Christina's carefully crafted image started to crack. People began pointing out the inconsistencies in her stories, and her social media posts were filled with criticism. The truth about her manipulations was finally coming to light. As the video went viral, Christina's reputation began to fall apart. The backlash on social media was harsh, and people started questioning the persona she had spent years building. Meanwhile, Brian, her ex-husband, was also struggling. The public attention surrounding their failed marriage and his involvement in this drama affected his professional life. He made a critical mistake at work, which led to him losing his job as a software engineer. The pressure of his personal and professional failures pushed him into a downward spiral. For Christina, the strain became too much to handle. Her perfect facade was crumbling, and with it, her sense of control. The fallout from this battle was far from over, and it was clear that the choices we made now would shape the future for everyone involved. Christina filed for divorce, cutting her final ties with Brian. Their son, Gabriel, became an innocent victim of their turmoil. With Christina's unstable situation, Gabriel was placed in a care facility, a far cry from the privileged life Christina had once proudly shown off. The cracks in the family's dynamics grew wider, forcing everyone to face the consequences of past actions. Amidst the upheaval, my mother approached me. She had always been more sympathetic toward Christina, but now she stood before me with tears in her eyes and an apology on her lips. "I'm sorry, Anna," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything. We should have treated you better. I see now how much pain we caused." Her words, though genuine, didn't erase the years of hurt. Still, I appreciated her honesty. It was a step forward, but healing would take time. I decided to keep our relationship polite but distant, focusing instead on what truly mattered, my own family's happiness and peace. With all the drama swirling around us, Arthur and I decided we needed a break. We planned a trip to an amusement park for Abigail, a day to escape the chaos and reconnect as a family. It turned out to be exactly what we needed. Abigail's laughter filled the air as she raced from ride to ride, her joy infectious. Arthur and I held hands, enjoying the simple moments that reminded us why our little family was so strong. The outing gave us a chance to step away from the shadows of the past and focus on the light of the present. Watching Abigail's excitement and feeling the warmth of Arthur's presence, I realized how far we'd come. This was our life, a life built on love, trust, and support. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. As the weeks passed after our trip, a sense of calm began to settle over us. The chaos that had once shaken my world was fading, and I could feel a new balance taking hold. Christina's downfall was harsh, but inevitable. Her constant need to prove herself, her envy, and her manipulative actions had finally caught up with her. The divorce, The loss of her son's care and her crumbling reputation were painful consequences of the choices she had made. Brian, too, was facing his own struggles. His dismissal from his job left him adrift, struggling to rebuild his life. But for me, these events felt distant, like echoes from a life I no longer lived. My focus had shifted entirely to my family and the contentment we had found together. Through everything, I learned a powerful lesson. The past may shape us, but it doesn't define us. With Christina's influence fading and my family thriving, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Our journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I could look forward to the future with peace in my heart. Arthur and I worked hard to strengthen our relationship, leaning on each other for support. Despite the challenges we had faced, our bond only grew stronger. Our daughter, Abigail, was thriving in her creative pursuits. Her YouTube channel continued to be a source of joy and positivity, not just for her, but for all of us. Watching her grow, smile, and share her talent with the world reminded me every day of what truly mattered: family, love, and happiness. One day, I received a letter from my mother. In it, she poured out her feelings of regret, apologizing for how things had turned out and asking for forgiveness. Her words felt sincere, and I appreciated her reaching out. But I also knew that healing the rift between us wouldn't happen overnight. I responded with kindness, acknowledging her apology, while gently letting her know that rebuilding our relationship would take time and effort from both sides. The experiences we had gone through had changed our family forever. My parents' favoritism toward Christina and the fallout from those decisions had taught me valuable lessons about strength, forgiveness, and resilience. I realized that healing wasn't just about time, it was about understanding and choosing to let go of the anger that weighed me down. In those quiet moments of reflection, I found clarity. The pain of the past had brought Arthur, Abigail, and me closer together. Our little family had grown stronger, and our appreciation for each other had deepened. Whether it was sharing a laugh during dinner or enjoying a quiet evening together, the small, simple moments became our foundation for happiness. As summer gave way to the crisp days of fall, I felt inspired to create something meaningful. I began planning a community project that would help families work through conflicts and build healthier relationships. Drawing from my own experiences, I wanted to offer support and guidance to others who might be facing similar struggles. This initiative became my way of turning the pain of the past into something positive. Looking back, I could see how far we had come. The tense moments at Grandma's funeral, the shocking revelations, and even the battles on social media had all been part of a journey that shaped who I was. Christina's story served as a cautionary tale, but it also highlighted my own strength and determination to move forward with love and purpose. As I closed that chapter of my life, I felt a deep sense of peace. The road had been hard, but it had also been eye-opening. The future, once clouded by uncertainty, now felt full of hope and promise. With Arthur by my side, Abigail's laughter lighting up our days, and my community project taking shape, I knew we were building something beautiful. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I was confident in one thing: the strength and unity of our family would see us through anything. The love we shared was our greatest gift, and it would guide us as we embraced the future together. So, you finally decided to show up. Grandma's voice was cold, nothing like the warm, loving tone I remembered from my childhood. "Grandma, what's going on?" I asked, my words rushing out. I was trying to make sense of everything. "They told me you were in a nursing home." "Don't," she said, raising her hand. That small gesture felt like a slap. "Your grandfather called you so many times. On his deathbed, he kept asking for you, his little scientist. But you never answered. You never visited. How could you be so heartless, Patricia?" "Let me see the number he was calling," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please, Grandma. I need to understand." She disappeared inside for a moment and came back with a small notepad, her hands trembling. The number on it was in Grandpa's handwriting. This isn't my number," I whispered. staring at the unfamiliar digits. I've had the same number since high school. They gave you a fake one. What do you mean? A fake number? She asked, her stern face softening. Your parents told us you changed it when you went to university, she said quietly. They said you wanted to stay away from us. Everything started to make sense. Grandma, I came here during break. Barbara was here. She wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Grandma's face turned pale. A nursing home? We never. Her voice trailed off, her hands shaking. Barbara and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life. They said. Her voice cracked. They said you were ashamed of us. That we weren't good enough for you anymore.
What?
My legs felt weak. I grabbed the porch railing for support. Grandma, they told us the funeral was at 1 p.m. today. I choked out, the words catching in my throat. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I had mixed up the time, but I knew I hadn't. I would never. The funeral was at 9 a.m., Grandma said slowly, realization hitting her. Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you didn't even bother to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Barbara was crying, saying she tried so hard to reach you. Tears filled my eyes, and before I knew it, I had fallen into Grandma's arms. We both broke down on the front porch, sobbing as all the pain and confusion poured out. He died thinking I abandoned him. I cried into her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. We know the truth now.
We know, she whispered.
After we wiped our tears, Grandma picked up the phone. Her fingers shook slightly as she dialed, but her voice was strong. Betty, yes, it's me. I need you, Jacob, and Barbara to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. She paused. No, it can't wait. When she hung up, she looked at me with determination. They'll be here in an hour. The lawyer is on his way too. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you, she said. I listened from the other room as they entered. I heard Mom's polite, practiced laugh, Dad's formal voice, and Barbara's bored sigh. Then Grandma spoke, her voice sharp and firm. Please, everyone, take a seat. Mr. Patrick is here to read David's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer opened his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable. Mom's perfect smile froze. Dad turned pale. Barbara's jaw dropped in shock. Mr. Patrick cleared his throat and began reading. I, David Smith, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room went silent except for the rustling of papers. First, the house was left to Grandma, along with enough money to take care of her. Then came the part that made Barbara's face turn red with anger. To my granddaughter, Patricia Smith, I leave my newly built laboratory at 1680 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Grandpa had built me a lab, my very own research facility. The rest of my estate, Mr. Patrick continued, will be divided equally between my granddaughters, Patricia and Barbara Smith. Barbara suddenly pushed her chair back and stood up, her face red with anger. But before she could say anything, Grandma raised her hand. There's more, she said, pulling out a letter. Your grandfather wanted this to be read too. I took a deep breath as she unfolded the letter. Memories of Grandpa filled my mind. Where should we put this one? Grandpa would ask every time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. In the box with the others, I'd reply, pulling out the special cardboard box I kept under my bed. I never displayed my awards, not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't want to seem like I was showing off. Mostly, though, I knew my success made my parents uncomfortable. Barbara, of course, had her own opinion. Nobody likes a know-it-all, she would sneer. But that didn't stop her from asking me for help with her science homework, or better yet, just having me do it for her. Barbara, that's cheating, I told her once as I watched her copy my answers. Patricia, help your sister right now, Mom ordered in a tone that left no room for argument. Family helps family. And just like that, I'd end up doing Barbara's homework, feeling guilty, but too scared to stand up to my parents.
It became a pattern.
Barbara would demand, my parents would insist, and I would give in. I hated it, but what could I do? Sometimes, I overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their hushed voices would drift upstairs while I sat in my room, working on my chemistry set or reading the latest research paper. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say, sounding frustrated. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke. But underneath his laugh, I could hear the truth. He didn't understand me. One evening, after I won yet another science competition, I heard Dad talking to Barbara about her grades, which had been slipping. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Barbara whined. "Listen, sweetheart," Dad said gently. "We need to focus on you. Patricia, well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, my hands clenched into fists. I fought back tears. They thought ignoring me was okay, because I was smart enough to take care of myself. As if being capable meant I didn't need love or support. I was the weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the science lab instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people came to me when they needed help with their homework, but real friends? Those were rare. The only people who truly understood me were Grandma and Grandpa. They were my support, my safe place. They would listen for hours as I excitedly talked about my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. "Look what I found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out a stack of science magazines or a new tool for my experiments. "I thought you might like this." Even with their love, I still felt an empty space inside where my parents' approval should have been. At school events, I would watch other families, parents hugging their kids, siblings cheering each other on, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that changed everything. I was graduating early. At just 17, I had completed all my high school requirements and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like taking my first real breath of fresh air. The campus was full of energy, and for the first time, I wasn't the odd one out. In my advanced chemistry class, I met Sarah and Jacob, two people who were just as excited about molecular structures as I was. For the first time in my life, I had friends who truly understood me. We spent hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, laughing at failed experiments, and celebrating our discoveries, things that would make most people's eyes glaze over. It was everything I had ever wanted. But even as I thrived in my new world, a part of me still longed for my family's approval. I called home every week, hoping for more than the short, uninterested conversations I usually got. "Yes, Patricia? That's nice," Mom would say when I told her about my research. Then, without fail, she would change the subject. "Oh, did you hear about Barbara's new job? She's working at that fancy boutique downtown." It felt like my achievements didn't matter. Like, I wasn't even worth celebrating. I didn't know it then, but my time at university was just the calm before the storm. One day, during one of my usual calls home, something felt off. I was in the middle of my second semester, deep in my research, when I heard Mom's voice in the background. "And with your father's condition getting worse," she said, probably talking to Dad, thinking I was on mute. My heart started racing. "Mom, what about Grandpa?" I interrupted. "What's wrong with him?" There was a long pause, too long to be innocent. "Oh, Patricia," she said, her voice suddenly changing. "I didn't realize you were still on the line. It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering." I didn't believe her. I'm coming home, I said right away, already thinking of the fastest way to get there. "I can be there by tomorrow morning." No, don't be ridiculous," Mom said sharply. "You need to focus on your studies. Barbara is helping them. Everything's under control." Something in her voice didn't feel right, but I told myself I was overthinking. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, so I called Grandma right after. "Oh yes, dear," Grandma said, but her voice sounded strange, distant. "Barbara has been such a help. She comes by often to check on your grandfather." "Barbara?" The same sister who always said visiting our grandparents was boring? Something didn't make sense. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of my grandparents' house, my heart pounding. Instead of Grandma's warm greeting, I found Barbara blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, pretending to be surprised. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma." "How is he?" "No one's home," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Grandpa's sick." "Where would they go?" "I don't know, Patricia." "Just go away," she snapped, trying to close the door. "Wait," I said, sticking my foot in the doorway. "Let me come in and wait for them." "No one's home," she shouted, shoving the door hard against my foot. "God, you're so annoying. Just leave." Confused and hurt, I backed away. I tried calling Grandma, but the call went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like her at all.
She always kept her phone on for me.
Always. Something was very wrong, and I was going to find out what. Since I couldn't reach Grandma, I had nowhere else to go but my parents' house. Maybe they had answers. When I walked into the kitchen, both Mom and Dad looked up, surprised. Dad didn't even try to hide his annoyance. "What are you doing home?" he asked, his voice cold. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But they're not home. Barbara wouldn't let me in." Mom quickly cut in, glancing at Dad. Her tone was light, but I could hear something underneath it. "Oh, honey, we were going to tell you. Your grandparents are in a nursing home." The world seemed to tilt under my feet.
What?
I stammered. "It was a quick decision," Dad said smoothly. "They needed special care. It's better this way." "Which nursing home?" I demanded, my voice rising.
I want to visit them.
"They're under quarantine right now," Mom said too quickly. "No visitors allowed." "Maybe next time." I wanted to push harder, to demand an explanation. But something about their calm, practiced responses made me feel like I was hitting a wall. I went back to university, but I couldn't stop thinking about that day. Barbara's angry face. My parents' nervous answers. The door I wasn't allowed to step through. Then the call came. It was Sunday morning. I was in the middle of an experiment, the fluorescent lights buzzing louder than usual. My phone lit up with Mom's number. My heart started racing. Something about the timing felt wrong. "Patricia," Mom said, her voice flat, emotionless. "Your grandfather passed away last night." The test tube slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed through the lab like a gunshot.
What?
My voice was barely a whisper. "No. The funeral is Saturday at 1 p.m., she continued. Her voice sounded strange, like she was reading from a script. "Don't be late." I didn't even clean up the broken glass. I rushed out of the lab, my mind spinning. Grandpa was gone. The man who believed in me, supported me, encouraged me, he was gone. And I hadn't even gotten to say goodbye. Memories of him filled my mind during the long journey home. I held back tears, remembering his smile, his voice, the way his eyes lit up whenever I talked about my experiments. On Saturday at 2:15 p.m., I arrived at the church. The empty parking lot was my first sign that something was wrong. My footsteps echoed in the silent building as I walked toward the entrance, dread growing with each step. Inside, a custodian was mopping the floor. The faint smell of cleaning supplies filled the air. "The Smith funerals?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up and frowned. "That ended hours ago. They held it at 9 a.m. It felt like a punch to the gut. My knees went weak, and I grabbed a nearby pew for support. Frantically, I pulled out my phone and called my parents. Mom answered, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Oh, Patricia, you must have mixed up the times. We clearly said 9 a.m. "No," I said firmly, my hands shaking. "You said 1 p.m. I wrote it down." "I know you said 1 p.m. Dad's voice came next, smooth and controlled. "Your grandmother is still in the nursing home, and she doesn't want to see you right now. She's very upset that you missed the funeral." Their words cut deep, each one like a knife. Shaken and desperate for answers, I told them I was heading back to university. But my feet had other plans. Without even thinking, I started walking. I found myself driving to my grandparents' house. The street looked exactly the same. The old oak tree, the neatly trimmed garden, the wind chimes Grandma loved so much. My hands shook as I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door opened. There she was, Grandma. The same Grandma who was supposedly in a nursing home, refusing to see me. Relief washed over me as I stepped forward to hug her, but she took a step back. The look in her eyes stopped me cold. Her face was hard, distant, like she was looking at a stranger. Grandma, I whispered, but the word felt empty. I didn't know how to process the coldness in her stare or the stiffness in her posture. This wasn't the woman who had once been my safe place. I had always been different. Even as a child, I was fascinated by the world around me in ways my family didn't understand. While Barbara played with dolls and dreamed of being a princess, I collected leaves and rocks, examining them with a tiny magnifying glass I had found in a cereal box. I asked questions my parents didn't have time for. Mom, why do leaves change color in fall? I had asked once, holding up a bright red maple leaf. Ask your teacher, Patricia, Mom said without looking at me. I'm busy helping Barbara with her dance costume. That was my childhood. A constant stream of questions met with dismissive answers. I remember being 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a bunch of household items spread out in front of me. I was experimenting, fascinated by what happened when baking soda mixed with different liquids. What on earth are you doing? Mom's voice broke my concentration. Watch this, I said excitedly, holding up a fizzing mixture. Now clean it up, she snapped. I need the kitchen spotless. Barbara's friends are coming over for her birthday party. Barbara's birthday parties were huge. Dozens of guests, life-sized cartoon characters, endless entertainment. Mine were small, quiet. Just my grandparents and a simple cake. I never complained, but the difference was obvious. Here's your birthday present, sweetheart, Dad would say, handing me yet another science book. I loved those books, but it was hard not to notice the mountain of toys and gadgets Barbara unwrapped at her parties. Even then, I knew where my parents' focus was. And now, standing in front of Grandma, her cold stare cutting through me, it felt like my family had finally turned their backs on me completely. I had always been grateful for my grandparents, Dad's parents. They were my safe place. The one place where I felt truly accepted. Where I felt truly understood. Every weekend and school break, my grandparents welcomed me with open arms. Tell me more about what you learned this week, little scientist, Grandpa would say, his eyes shining with excitement. I would eagerly share my latest discoveries, and he always listened like every word mattered. His enthusiasm made me feel special, like I was truly seen and valued. Barbara never came with me to visit them. They're so boring, she would complain. Besides, Mom and Dad are taking me to the new theme park this weekend. I would watch from the window as they drove away without me, my chest tight with hurt and jealousy. Why can't I go too? I asked once, desperate to be included. Oh, honey, Mom said, barely paying attention as she patted my head. It wouldn't be fun for you. You'd probably just want to learn how the rides work. That's how it always was. I didn't fit what they wanted in a daughter. I was the one who asked too many questions, who liked microscopes more than makeup. Barbara, on the other hand, was perfect in their eyes, a normal girl with normal interests. Everything changed when I started middle school. The first person, besides my grandparents, who truly saw me for who I was turned out to be my science teacher, Mrs. Ashley. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, your daughter has extraordinary potential, she said during a parent-teacher meeting. I sat just outside the room, but I could hear every word. I've never seen a student understand science so easily. We should consider moving Patricia into the gifted program. I knew that tone in Mom's voice before she even spoke. That sounds like a lot of work, she said, uninterested. She's doing fine where she is. Besides, we have to think about Barbara. Patricia shouldn't get special treatment. My heart sank. I already knew what was coming. They were going to say no. They always did when it came to me. But then Grandma found out. The very next day, she marched into my school like a general ready for battle. standing in the principal's office. Her voice was sharp and unwavering. "My granddaughter will take those exams and get every opportunity she deserves," Grandma said firmly. "I don't care what her parents think." The principal hesitated. "Mrs. Smith, we need parental consent. My son and his wife are under my care," Grandma said coldly. "You just make sure Patricia gets her chance." And somehow, she made it happen. After a week of arguments, and I suspect some financial persuasion from my grandparents, my parents finally agreed to let me take the placement tests. I passed every single one. Suddenly, my world opened in ways I had never imagined. The gifted program introduced me to international science competitions, academic Olympiads, and research seminars. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. I was finally surrounded by people who understood me, people who got excited about the same things I did. It felt like I had found where I truly belonged. My first international competition project was about sustainable ecosystems, and I won. Then, I won another. And another. I threw myself into my work, driven by a passion that had always been inside me, but had finally found a place to shine. That moment around Grandma's dining table is one I will never forget. She stood there, Grandpa's letter in her hands, her voice strong and steady. "To my son and daughter-in-law," she read aloud. "Your treatment of your daughters has been shameful. Every child deserves equal love and support, yet favoritism has poisoned this family." "Stop!" Barbara shrieked, jumping to her feet. "This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything?" Her outburst stunned the room. She turned on our parents, her voice sharp and full of anger. "You promised. You said if I played nice, if I visited him and acted like the perfect granddaughter, everything would be mine. You made me beg a dying man." Her words hit like a slap, exposing the truth. She wasn't mourning Grandpa. She was furious that all her pretending hadn't gotten her the reward she expected. "And now what?" she shouted, her voice rising. "Little Miss Perfect gets a whole laboratory and I only get half the money? No. Give me the house. She doesn't need both. She can keep her stupid lab." I sat there in silence as my sister's mask finally cracked. The perfect daughter act was gone. All that was left was anger and entitlement. For a moment, the room was completely still. Then Mom broke the silence. "Patricia, you heard your sister. Be reasonable. Do you know how much we've invested in your education? All those science camps, competitions." I almost laughed at how ridiculous it was. "You didn't pay for any of that," I said quietly. "Grandma and Grandpa did." "That's not the point," Mom snapped. "Family means sacrifice. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share to Barbara. She needs it more than you do." "Honor his memories?" Grandma's voice cut through the room like a whip. She stood up, gripping Grandpa's letter tightly. "Let me remind you exactly what David had to say about this family's idea of sacrifice," she said, her voice firm. Then she read on. "To my son and his wife, your blatant favoritism has poisoned this family. Your treatment of Patricia has been nothing short of emotional abuse. Meanwhile, you have turned Barbara into an entitled, spoiled." "How dare you?" Barbara shrieked. "No. How dare you?" Grandma thundered back, her voice shaking with emotion. "You deceived and manipulated a dying man. And now you have the nerve to talk about sacrifice and families?" She stormed to the door and threw it open. "Leave. All of you." "I only regret that David left you anything at all," Grandma said, her voice firm. "Barbara, you are nothing but a spoiled, selfish daughter who learned from her spoiled, selfish parents." The sound of slamming doors and angry shouts echoed as they left, leaving the house strangely quiet. That was 6 years ago. Now, Grandpa's research facility, the one he built for me, is my home. It's more than I ever dreamed of. And sometimes, when I'm working late at night, I swear I can feel his presence, proud, loving, and always encouraging. Grandma visits often. Her curiosity is as sharp as ever. She asks about my latest projects, and she even takes science classes at a community college. She says it helps her understand my work better, but I think she just wants to share in the excitement Grandpa and I always had. As for Barbara and my parents, I haven't spoken to them since that day. Sometimes, I see their names pop up on my phone or in my email inbox, but I delete the messages without reading them. They made their choice, and I made mine. The other day, I found an old photo tucked inside one of Grandpa's books. It showed a younger me, peering through a magnifying glass in his yard while he pointed something out. On the back, he had written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I keep that photo on my desk now. It reminds me that family isn't always about blood. Family is about the people who believe in you, who love you for who you are, and who celebrate your differences instead of trying to change them. New York's autumn mornings always start with light rain. In a quiet corner of downtown, near the Empire State Building, the silver sign for Jessica Weber's law office shone in the morning light. After leaving a big law firm 11 years ago, Jessica had built her own strong and successful practice. Now 45, she sat at her desk on the 20th floor, going through documents for a new case. On the walls were her law degree from Columbia and many awards, including one for being a top woman business owner in New York State. Next to them was a family photo of her smiling with her husband Adam and their 13-year-old daughter, Angela. Adam was working in Singapore for a few more months. "Ms. Weber, here are the documents for the 9:30 a.m. meeting," said Emma, her secretary, handing her a neat stack of papers. Emma was always very organized, and Jessica trusted her completely. "Thank you." "Oh, did you hear anything from Angela's school?" "Yes, they changed the choir practice schedule. I sent you the email." Jessica glanced at the clock. It was 9 a.m. Angela would be on the school bus by now. Just then, her phone beeped. A message from Angela appeared. "Mom, I got full marks on my math test. I also memorized the song for the concert, so you have to come." Jessica smiled. Angela was smart like her and kind like her dad. She also had a real gift for music. As Jessica typed her reply, she thought about Adam in Singapore. His job at a big global tech company would keep him there for 9 more months. She missed him, but their nightly video calls helped them stay close. "Congratulations, Angela. Let's order your favorite Thai food tonight to celebrate. And, of course, I'll be at your concert. We'll send a video to Dad, too." Balancing work and being a mom was never easy, but moments like this made it all worth it. Still, Jessica handled everything well. She always made time for breakfast with Angela and tried to be home for dinner whenever she could. On weekends, they watched movies or went jogging together in Central Park. With her husband away, Jessica and Angela had grown even closer. "Ms. Weber, it's almost time for your meeting," Emma said, bringing Jessica back to the moment. The case today was a tough one, a dispute with a big construction company. But Jessica liked challenges. They made her work feel meaningful. Just before stepping into the meeting room, Jessica noticed a message from her mother, Pamela. "Jessica, about this month's rent." She sighed quietly. After her father passed away, her mother's finances had quickly fallen apart. Though her father had looked successful, he had left behind a lot of debt. The life insurance money was all used to pay it off, and soon, debt collectors started calling Pamela. Using her legal skills, Jessica stepped in to protect her mom and began helping her with money. She paid for her mom's fancy apartment and other living costs, something she felt was her duty as a daughter. She also supported her younger sister, Rachel, who became a single mom after their parents' divorce. Rachel worked part-time jobs, but she couldn't afford her son Nathan's school fees. When Rachel asked for help, Jessica couldn't say no. But now wasn't the time to think about all that. She would reply to her mother later. Jessica walked into the meeting room and smiled. "Good morning, everyone. Let's begin." After the meeting, she looked out the window. The rain had stopped, and the sky was bright blue. Angela would be in her favorite English class by now. Just then, Emma entered with a stack of papers. Final documents for tomorrow's trial. Also, Angela's school called again. They changed the parent-teacher meeting date. Clouds were gathering again outside. Emma's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Weber, your mother is on the phone." That was strange. Pamela usually waited at least a day after texting.
Calls from her mom almost always meant one thing: money.
I'm sorry I didn't reply earlier. I've been busy with work. What's going on? Her mother's voice came clearly. It's about the rent. And Nathan's school trip. He really wants to go. Jessica held back another sigh. Last week it was a new hobby. The week before, tutoring costs. It never seemed to end. I'll think about it, she said quietly. I'll check the budget, Jessica said. On the other end of the phone, she could hear her mother pause. The old Jessica would have said yes right away. But lately, she had started to think more carefully about how much money she was giving to her family. What bothered her most was how her mother Pamela and sister Rachel were living. On social media, they often posted photos of expensive clothes and fancy meals, things that didn't match their part-time jobs. Jessica thought about Angela's future. She knew she couldn't keep sending money forever. Her husband Adam had said the same during a recent video call. Helping family is important, but it's not good to make them rely on you too much. After ending the call with her mother, Jessica opened her laptop. She started writing a reply to the email she had put off earlier. Please let me rethink how much money I send starting next month. I want to talk about this properly. Let me know a good time for you. She paused before sending it, wondering how this would affect her family. But she knew it was something she had to do. As soon as she sent the email, her phone rang. It was Rachel. Why now? Rachel asked angrily. Think about Nathan's future. Jessica stayed calm. Let's talk about this calmly, Rachel. Rachel's voice shook. You don't hold back when it comes to Angela's needs.
Jessica was surprised by that.
Of course, she wanted the best for Angela. Wasn't that normal for any parent? The call ended without solving anything. A week later, the parent-teacher meeting at Angela's school was coming up. There was a knock at the office door. Emma came in. Here's everything ready for your business trip tomorrow. You have a morning flight.
Thank you, Jessica said.
Then she added, call my mother. See if she can take care of Angela tomorrow. Usually, Jessica didn't like leaving Angela with her mother. But tomorrow's trial was very important, and there was no other option. Also, she was still worried about her mother after the talk about cutting back the money. Jessica hadn't heard anything from her mother. Rachel had called, full of anger, but her mom's silence felt strange. Emma came back into the room. Your mother said yes. Nathan will be there too, so they can play together. Jessica felt uneasy. Her mom usually made excuses, saying she felt sick or already had plans. But this time, she agreed too quickly. Still, with an important trial the next day, the trip couldn't be avoided. If Angela had to stay somewhere, her grandmother's house was the best choice. But Jessica couldn't shake the bad feeling in her chest. Over dinner, she gently asked Angela, is it okay for you to stay at Grandma's tomorrow? You can play with Nathan. Angela hesitated. Okay, but Nathan has been avoiding me lately. Jessica took note of her daughter's words. Nathan acting distant. Rachel being upset. Her mother agreeing too fast. Something didn't feel right, though she couldn't explain exactly why. The next morning, on the way to the airport, Jessica remembered what she had told Angela before leaving. Promise me. If anything happens, call me right away. I will, Mom. Don't worry. Everything will be fine, Angela said with her usual bright smile. Jessica watched her daughter wave goodbye in the rearview mirror. The image stayed in her mind longer than usual. At New York International Airport, the place was busy as always. After boarding the plane, Jessica looked through her notes for the trial. It was a major case for her firm, and she needed to focus. But something kept bothering her. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking off shortly, the flight attendant announced. Just before turning off her phone, Jessica checked for messages. Nothing from Angela. Nothing from Pamela either. That shouldn't have been a big deal, but the silence made her feel even more uneasy. In court, the case went well. Jessica spoke clearly, her points were strong, and the other side was struggling to keep up. After the session ended, her phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Angela. Just one word. Mom. Jessica's heart dropped. She knew something was wrong. What's wrong, Angela? Grandma and the others, they left without me. Angela's voice shook over the phone. Jessica froze. What do you mean? Tell me everything. I was playing in the yard. Then everyone got in the car and left. Nathan, Grandma, and Aunt Rachel. They haven't come back. Jessica's hands started to shake. Where are you now? At Grandma's house. What should I do? Stay right there, Jessica said, her voice firm, though her heart was racing. I'm calling the police right now. As soon as she hung up, Jessica called her mother, Pamela. The phone rang several times. When her mother finally answered, her voice was strangely calm. I'm about to get on a plane, she said, and then hung up. Jessica felt anger rising in her chest. She immediately called the police. She explained that her 13-year-old daughter had been left alone on purpose by her grandmother and aunt. Next, she contacted her office. Emma, get the paperwork ready for a restraining order. Also, stop all money transfers to my mother and Rachel's bank accounts. Yes, I'll take care of it right away, Emma replied. While booking the next flight back to New York, Jessica called Angela again. Angela, a police car is on the way. I'm coming back as fast as I can. Her daughter's voice was shaky. Mom, I'm scared. It's okay, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. I'll be there soon. After hanging up, Jessica had to fight back tears. How could her own mother and sister do something like this? Leaving a 13-year-old child alone was clearly child neglect. On the way to the airport, Jessica stayed in touch with the police. They told her a patrol car had already reached the house, and Angela was safe. Security camera footage showed Pamela and Rachel getting into the car, laughing as they left. It wasn't a mistake. It was planned. On the flight back, Jessica's hands shook as she wrote notes in her notebook, timelines, evidence, legal steps. She forced herself to stay calm. She had to handle this like the lawyer she was. When she arrived at her mother's house, a police officer was standing with Angela. As soon as Jessica saw her daughter, she almost broke down. Mom, Angela cried, running into her arms. Jessica hugged her tightly. She could feel how much her daughter was shaking. You were so brave. Everything is okay now. A police officer walked over. We've seen the camera footage. It clearly shows they left on purpose. Would you like to press charges? Jessica took a deep breath. Then she answered firmly, yes. And I want to apply for a restraining order too. At that moment, her phone rang. It was her mother. She declined the call. Right now, protecting Angela was the only thing that mattered. On the way home, Angela slowly began to talk about what had happened. Nathan suddenly started ignoring me. Then while I was playing outside, I heard the door lock. When I turned around, they were gone. Jessica listened carefully, trying to connect the dots. The way her mother and Rachel had changed lately was starting to make sense. Jessica had already told her family she was rethinking the financial support. Nathan's behavior and what happened with Angela were all connected. Her mother, Pamela, had used Angela to pressure Jessica into continuing the money. Rachel, her sister, had used the moment to let out her jealousy toward Jessica's success. As soon as Jessica got home, she called her office. Emma, cancel all my appointments starting tomorrow. Also, please book a therapy session for Angela. That day marked a big change in Jessica's family, but it was something she had to do. She needed to protect her daughter and end the unhealthy family situation. In the office conference room, a serious mood filled the air. Documents were neatly placed on the table, security camera screenshots, the first police report, and the restraining order paperwork. All of it showed how serious yesterday's events had been. Ms. Weber, your mother has called again, Emma said quietly. It's the 10th call this morning. Log the calls but don't answer, Jessica said. She had already spoken to her husband, Adam, on a video call early that morning. He had offered to come home right away, but Jessica told him not to. She wanted to stay calm and handle everything the right way, through legal steps, not emotions. Henry Winkler, the firm's consulting attorney and an old friend, came into the room. He had rushed over as soon as he heard what happened.
I've reviewed everything, Henry said.
The restraining order will definitely go through. The question is what happens next. Jessica nodded. I've already started the process to fully stop all financial support. That's a smart move, Henry said, flipping through the documents. But we need to be ready for their reaction. They might try to damage your name in public. Just then, Jessica's phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother, sent through an old social media account Jessica hadn't used in a while. Why did you call the police? This is a family matter. Angela wasn't in danger. It was just a lesson. Jessica's hands shook as she read the words. A lesson? Leaving a 13-year-old girl alone like that was not a lesson, it was cruel. She could feel the twisted intent behind the message, to make her and Angela feel weak and helpless. Don't react emotionally, Henry said gently. They'll use anything you say or do against you. He was right. Jessica took a deep breath and steadied herself. Her 21 years as a lawyer were being put to the test. Did you manage to get Angela's therapy appointment? She asked Emma. Yes, it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. with Dr. Helen Mirren. Jessica nodded. Helping Angela heal was her top priority. The night before, Angela had woken up crying from a nightmare. She had asked, Mom, are you still here? Jessica's heart broke hearing that. Jessica, Henry said in a quiet voice, do you know your mother and Rachel's financial situation? Yes, Jessica replied. I've been paying for Mom's rent, Nathan's school, and other expenses. Without that money, they won't be able to manage. I know, Jessica said softly, but that's the result of the choices they made. Just then, a call came from the front desk of the office. Emma answered and turned to Jessica. Rachel is here. What should I do? Don't let her in, Jessica said right away. But before Emma could act, Rachel's voice could already be heard coming from the hallway. Jessica, please. Just listen to me. It was for Angela's sake. Jessica closed her eyes. Rachel truly believed that by hurting Angela, she could force Jessica to keep sending money. It was cruel and selfish. Rachel's voice reminded Jessica of the past, of the days they played together as children, laughing and running through the park. Those warm memories now felt like cracks on thin ice, still there, but fragile and painful. Should I call security? Emma asked gently. Yes, please, Jessica said with a quiet sigh. A few minutes later, Rachel's voice faded as security escorted her out, but the heavy feeling remained in the conference room. It's not over yet, Jessica whispered. They will try again. Henry, her legal advisor, nodded. That's why it's important to keep records. We must document everything, every message, every call, every visit. He was right. Jessica couldn't let emotions get in the way. She had to stay focused, stay sharp, and protect Angela at all costs. That afternoon, Jessica left work early. She went to pick up Angela from school, just like she had promised. When she arrived, Angela was laughing with her friends. But the moment she saw her mom, she ran over and hugged her tightly.
Mom.
You really came, just like you said. Jessica's heart ached. Angela still feared being left behind. That fear wouldn't go away easily. I'll always come, sweetheart. I'll never leave you. On the way home, Angela talked about her school day, her classes, her lunch, her favorite teacher. It was a normal conversation, but Jessica noticed the little signs, hesitant pauses, nervous glances. Her daughter was still healing. When they got home, there was a message on the answering machine. Jessica, please, let's talk. We can't let our family fall apart like this. It was Pamela's voice. Jessica didn't wait for it to finish. She deleted it. This wasn't just a family disagreement. It was betrayal. Her daughter had been put in danger. There was no going back. Later that night, after Angela had gone to sleep, Jessica worked in her study. She had a full list of things to prepare. The hearing for the restraining order, the therapy appointments, the steps to stop all financial support. Everything had to move forward. A month later, the leaves had turned red and orange. Jessica looked out her office window at the autumn view. On her screen were alerts. Pamela's rent was unpaid, and Nathan had been expelled from school. The effects of stopping support were becoming clear. Emma walked in with new papers. They're from Pamela and Rachel's lawyer. At first, they threatened to sue for defamation. But the security camera footage proves your case. Schedule a meeting with their lawyer, Jessica said calmly. She was ready for whatever came next. Jessica had made up her mind. She would not let her emotions control her. Everything from this point on would be handled through the law. That was the safest way to protect both herself and Angela. The night before, Angela had finally slept peacefully. It was the first calm night in a long time. Her regular counseling sessions were beginning to help. Dr. Mirren, the psychologist, had told Jessica that Angela was showing signs of improvement. She was healing slowly but surely. Still, Jessica could see the small signs, nervous looks or moments of silence, that reminded her of the fear Angela had experienced. It made Jessica's heart tighten every time. "Your mother has moved out," Emma said, interrupting Jessica's thoughts. "She left the fancy apartment in Rochester last week. She was 4 months behind on rent." Jessica nodded quietly. She had expected this. Her mother had moved into a small government housing unit far from the city. It was a big change from the luxury life she used to show off. "There's more," Emma continued. "Rachel's situation has changed too. Nathan's father visited and found out what had been going on. He's been granted full custody, and Rachel now has to pay child support. She's living with your mother now." Jessica listened in silence. She wasn't happy about their suffering, but she knew it was the result of their own choices. Henry, the consulting lawyer, entered the office with some new information. "There's something you should know," he said carefully. "Yesterday, Rachel was caught stealing from a local supermarket. It didn't go to court. They settled it with a plea deal." Jessica closed her eyes. Her sister's life was clearly falling apart. "There's more," Henry added. "Your mother was seen at a church charity, standing in line to receive free food." Jessica was shocked for a moment. Her mother, who once wore designer clothes and dined at expensive restaurants, was now asking for help from a food bank. "She deleted all her social media," Emma said. "All the pictures of luxury brands and fancy vacations are gone. It looks like they've given up trying to show off that life." The life they had lived, built on Jessica's support, was gone. The image they had tried so hard to keep up had finally crumbled. Henry gave his legal opinion. "This clearly shows that their lifestyle was only possible because of your financial help. Stopping that support was fully justified. They had no backup plan. They were completely dependent on you." Jessica nodded again. She felt no joy in their downfall, only a quiet understanding that her decision had been necessary. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted peace, safety, and a healthy life for her daughter. This was the result of a choice she had to make. And it was the right one. Jessica knew that the decision she had made was hard, but it was necessary. It came with consequences, but they were a part of choosing to protect herself and her daughter. "Mom, look," Angela called out cheerfully that afternoon when she came home from school. She held up a colorful drawing with pride. "My teacher said we should enter it in the school art exhibition." Jessica smiled, feeling a wave of relief. Angela was slowly returning to her cheerful self. Her eyes were bright, and her energy had come back. For a while after the incident with her grandmother and aunt, Angela had struggled in school. Her grades had slipped, and she had been quiet and nervous. But now, she was doing better again. "Congratulations," Jessica said warmly. "It's a beautiful piece. I'm so proud of you." That evening, during a video call with Adam, Jessica shared the news. He smiled widely. "I'm so glad to hear Angela's doing better," he said. "I have some good news too. I was able to shorten my work trip. I'll be coming home next month." Jessica and Angela were overjoyed. A few weeks later, at the New York International Airport, Jessica and Angela stood in the arrival area waiting. When they spotted Adam, Angela ran to him shouting, "Dad's here." Adam knelt down to hug her tightly. "I missed you so much," he said. Jessica joined them, wrapping her arms around her husband. "Welcome back," she whispered. "It's good to be together again." As they got into the car, Adam looked in the rearview mirror at Angela. "So, how's school going?" Angela smiled. "It's fun. Next week is the Winter Music Festival, and I've got a piano solo." Her voice was full of excitement. The fear and sadness she had once carried were no longer there. She was growing stronger, more confident, and it showed. As the family drove home, Jessica felt a quiet happiness in her heart. These normal moments, laughing together, eating dinner, planning for school events, meant so much more now. She didn't take them for granted anymore. The next morning, Jessica arrived at the office early. On her desk was an envelope with a letter inside. Emma had marked it as opened. It came through legal channels, she explained. Jessica opened the letter and read the simple words from her mother. Jessica, I won't ask for forgiveness anymore. I just hope you and Angela are happy. Jessica sighed deeply. Forgiving someone and rebuilding trust were not the same. She wasn't ready to fix the relationship, but she had already moved forward. Her focus now was on building a new, healthy family life, with no fear and no guilt. That evening, when she returned home, Adam was already in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of warm food filled the house. In the living room, Angela was practicing her piano solo. Her fingers danced over the keys as music filled the home. Jessica and Adam sat together listening. For the first time in a long while, peace truly returned. From as far back as I can remember, I felt like I wasn't enough. My parents never said it out loud, but they didn't need to. The look in their eyes when I was born, hoping for a boy, told me everything. Then, 4 years later, when my sister Laura came along, I knew for sure. I was Mary, their firstborn daughter, and I wasn't what they wanted. I once overheard Mom telling Dad, maybe the next one will be a boy, after Laura was born. But there wouldn't be a next one. Complications during Laura's birth meant Mom couldn't have more kids. Their dream of having a son was gone, passed on to the hope that one day their daughters might give them grandsons instead. Growing up in our small suburban house, I watched Laura figure out how to get whatever she wanted. She'd flash her big brown eyes, and our parents would melt like butter. I, on the other hand, grew more independent. I knew I wasn't going to get the attention she got, so I learned to rely on myself. While Laura knew exactly how to charm them, I focused on taking care of myself. We had everything we needed: clothes, food, a safe home, and a good education. But love and warmth felt hard to come by, at least for me. Over time, I stopped expecting it. I built my own emotional walls and got used to standing on my own. During my senior year of high school, I told my parents at dinner, I'm going to study economics. They exchanged a look. Are you sure, honey? Mom asked, her fork pausing midair. That's such a technical field. Dad nodded in agreement. What about teaching or nursing? Something more suitable for a young lady. I stood my ground. I've already been accepted to State University. I even got a partial scholarship. Mom sighed. Well, it's your choice, she said, the disappointment in her voice all too familiar by then. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I expected it. Across the table, Laura smirked. I'm thinking of studying psychology, she said. Mom and Dad instantly lit up. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Mom beamed. You've always been so good with people. I pushed my peas around my plate, letting their voices drift past me like background noise. I'd learned a long time ago that trying to win their approval wasn't worth it. Instead, I focused on my future and the freedom college would bring. I met Scott during my 3rd year at State University. He was a senior in the economics department, and we literally bumped into each other in the library. I dropped my statistics textbook, and he picked it up. That's how it all started. You're in Professor Timothy's macroeconomics class, right? He asked, handing me the book. I've seen you asking all the smart questions. I blushed, not used to someone noticing me in a good way. Yeah, that's me. The one who drags class out with questions. Not annoying at all, he smiled. Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime. I could tell you about the upper-level courses you'll take next year. That coffee turned into dinner, then movie nights, and soon we were inseparable. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. Scott didn't compare me to anyone else. He liked me for who I was. When he graduated, Scott got a job at Anderson Consulting while I stayed to finish my degree. He waited for me, and after I graduated, we decided to move in together. We found a small apartment downtown, not fancy, but it was ours. Mom, Dad, this is Scott, I said during his first visit to my parents' house. Their reaction was instant and surprising.
Oh, Scott.
Mom practically squealed. We're so happy to finally meet you. Will you be joining us for Thanksgiving? Christmas? Dad clapped him on the shoulder. Son, we've heard so much about you. Tell me about your job. Mary says you're in finance. The word son caught my attention. Of course, they were finally getting the son they'd always wanted, even if it was through marriage. I watched as they showered Scott with attention, asking about his career and future plans, and when he might want to settle down. Meanwhile, Laura sat in the corner, shooting daggers at us. She was living at home after college, still single, and clearly unhappy that for once, I had something she didn't. She couldn't stand it. A year after we moved in together, during a quiet dinner at home, Scott got down on one knee and proposed. I said yes right away. We decided on a small, intimate wedding, despite my parents pushing for something bigger. It's your big day, Mom argued. Don't you want something more special? This is special, I told her, and for once, I didn't care if it wasn't what she wanted. It was what I wanted. I insisted. This is exactly what we want. The ceremony was perfect, just close friends and family in a small garden. Scott and I exchanged vows, enjoyed a simple dinner reception, and went back to our apartment as husband and wife. It felt right to start our married life in the same place where we had already built so much together. The question started almost as soon as we got back from our honeymoon. So, when can we expect some good news? Mom would ask, her eyes shining with excitement, hoping for a grandson. We're saving for a house first, I explained over and over. We want to be financially stable before we start a family. Dad would shake his head in disapproval. Your mother and I didn't have much when we started out, and we managed just fine. Every family dinner turned into an update on their friends' growing families. Did you hear the Hendersons just became grandparents again? Another boy. Or, the Smith's daughter announced she's pregnant, and she's younger than you, Mary. After 3 years of saving, Scott and I finally bought our first house. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, or at least ours and the bank's. The moment we signed the mortgage papers, I knew the baby questions would only get worse, and they did. What I didn't expect was Laura's announcement just 5 months later. I'm pregnant, she said during Thursday dinner, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. It's David's. David, her boyfriend of 7 months, was someone none of us really liked. The next few months were chaotic. David disappeared as soon as Laura started showing, leaving her to move back in with our parents. But instead of treating it as a scandal or shame, my parents turned their home into a shrine for their future grandchild. When little Angela was born, you'd think she was royalty. My parents converted Laura's old room into a nursery, bought every baby item imaginable, and practically rearranged their entire lives to help raise her. Isn't she perfect? Mom would coo, rocking Angela during our visits. Don't you just want one of your own, Marys? What hurt more than my parents' constant pressure was watching Scott with Angela. He'd get down on the floor to play with her, make silly faces, and spend hours entertaining her with stuffed animals and children's books. Scott is such a natural with children, Mom would say pointedly. He's going to make such a wonderful father. I started tracking my cycle, taking vitamins, and doing everything the pregnancy website suggested. Month after month, we tried, and month after month, nothing happened. Meanwhile, Scott spent more and more time at my parents' house playing with Angela. She's such a sweet kid, he'd say on our drives home. Did you see her trying to walk? She almost said, Uncle, today? You're so good with her, my mom would gush. Just imagine how amazing you'll be with your own children. I'd smile and nod, but inside, I felt a growing knot of worry. Why wasn't I pregnant yet? What if something was wrong? I told myself to be patient, that it would happen when the time was right. After a year of trying with no success, I was still trying to stay hopeful. These things take time, I told myself. But when Mom found out we'd been trying for a year, she panicked. A whole year, Mary? Something's wrong. You need to see a doctor immediately, she insisted. And before I'd even left their house that day, she was already sending me contact info for fertility specialists. To get her off my back, I made an appointment. Scott came with me, holding my hand in the exam room while the doctor asked questions and ran tests, blood work, ultrasounds, and more. Then came the day of the results. The doctor looked at me with a gentle expression. I'm sorry, she said, "but the tests show that you're infertile." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. Scott squeezed my hand, but I could barely feel it. The doctor kept talking about options, IVF, adoption, but her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from far away. That night, Scott and I sat at the kitchen table, picking at our takeout. "We can look into adoption or IVF," he said. "There are options." I nodded, but I felt hollow inside. How could I tell my family? How would they react? I decided to rip the Band-Aid off at the next family dinner. "Mom, Dad," I said during a quiet moment, "I need to tell you something. I saw a specialist." I took a deep breath. "I can't have children. I'm infertile." The silence that followed was unbearable. Mom's face twisted with disgust. "Infertile?" she said, almost spitting the word. "What kind of woman can't even do the one thing she's supposed to do?" Dad wouldn't even look at me. "An empty vessel," he muttered. "Just a useless flower." Laura sat there smirking, bouncing Angela on her knee. "Well, I guess we know who the real woman in the family is." I looked at Scott, desperate for support, but he just stared at his plate, saying nothing. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I pushed back from the table and ran out of the house, ignoring their voices calling after me. After that night, I couldn't bring myself to go back there. But Scott kept going. He spent time with Angela, chatted with Laura, and listened to my parents. He'd come home full of stories. "Angela learned a new song today," he'd say. "You should have seen her dancing around the living room." Or, "Laura made this amazing lasagna. She's really getting good at cooking." Each word felt like a stab to my heart. At night, I'd lie awake next to him, listening to his steady breathing, wondering if he resented me for not being able to give him children. The guilt consumed me, and it only got worse when he came home with that wistful look in his eyes after playing with Angela. Then came the day everything fell apart. It was a regular Saturday, and I came home early from work, arms full of Chinese takeout, Scott's favorite. But the house was dark and empty. His car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't unusual, but something felt wrong. I called his phone. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. Laura Thompson posted a new photo. I usually ignored her posts, but something made me click this time. My stomach dropped as the image loaded. Scott sitting on my parents' couch, Angela in his lap, and Laura pressed up against his side. All three of them were grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Family time with my favorite people." My hands shook as I grabbed my car keys. The logical part of my mind tried to tell me there could be an innocent explanation, but deep down I knew better. The whole drive to my parents' house, my mind replayed every interaction between Scott and Laura over the past year, each one twisting into something ugly. The driveway was full. Mom's car, Dad's truck, and Scott's sedan. The front door was unlocked, as always. I slipped inside quietly, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Voices floated from the living room. "Scott, you know we already think of you as a son," my mom was saying. "And you deserve to be happy. You've been amazing with Angela," Dad added. "And Laura, well, she's young. Fertile. You could have more children together. Why stay trapped in a marriage with—" My mom's voice dropped, but I still heard the disgust in it. "A barren woman." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. I burst into the room, making them all jump. The scene was like a nightmare. My parents and Laura sitting on one couch, Scott in Dad's armchair, and Angela playing on the floor between them. They looked like one big, happy family, planning to cut me out. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. My voice came out stronger than I expected.
Scott looked ashamed, at least.
But my parents? They didn't even try to hide it. "Mary," Mom said, standing up with her chin held high, "we're just having an honest discussion about what's best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You're trying to convince my husband to leave me for my sister." "Well, someone has to think about his future," Dad said sharply. "You can't give him what he wants, what he deserves." "Laura can." I turned to Scott, waiting for him to defend me, to stand up for our marriage, to tell them they were wrong. But he just stared at the floor. "Scott," I said, my voice cracking. I'm sorry, Mary, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. But they're right. I want children, a family, and I've developed feelings for Laura. Laura smirked, reaching out to put her hand on Scott's arm. You don't belong here anymore, she said smugly. This is my family now. I looked around the room, at my dad's stern disapproval, my mom's cold satisfaction, Laura's triumphant smile, and Scott's guilty expression. Years of marriage and a lifetime of family ties meant nothing to them. Without another word, I turned and walked out. I drove home in a daze, packed a suitcase without thinking, and left a note for Scott. File for divorce.
My lawyer will contact yours.
The divorce was quick and impersonal. We split everything evenly. I moved into a small apartment across town and threw myself into work, trying to forget. But social media wouldn't let me. One morning during a coffee break, a coworker gasped at her phone. Oh my God, Mary, I'm so sorry. I forgot to unfollow your sister. She tried to hide her screen, but I'd already seen it. Laura in a huge white wedding dress, Scott in a tux, and my parents smiling proudly beside them. It's fine, I said, even though it wasn't. I hope they're happy. 2 years later, another post popped up. Welcome, baby Shirley. My replacement had given them the daughter they'd always wanted. Scott now had his perfect family, Angela, who he'd adopted, and his new baby with Laura. That day, I deleted all my social media accounts. But life has a funny way of surprising you. One Sunday, I was shopping for groceries when my cart accidentally bumped into someone else's.
I'm so sorry, a deep voice said.
I looked up and saw the kindest brown eyes I'd ever seen. I'm Steven, he said, helping me gather my scattered groceries. Can I buy you coffee to make up for being a klutz? One coffee turned into dinner, then dating, and before I knew it, I was falling in love again. This time, I promised to be honest from the start. I need to tell you something, I said one night, 7 months into our relationship. I can't have children. I'm infertile. Steven took my hands in his and looked into my eyes. Mary, I love you, Steven said, holding my hands. If we want kids someday, we'll adopt, or we won't. It doesn't matter. I just want you. We got married in a small courthouse ceremony, just us and a few close friends. No family drama, no fancy dress, no big expectations, just love. A year into our marriage, I started feeling strange, nauseous in the mornings, dizzy at random times. Steven insisted I see a doctor. Mrs. Anna, the doctor said, looking at my test results, congratulations. You're pregnant. I stared at her, stunned. That's impossible. I'm infertile. I have tests to prove it. She smiled gently. The human body is mysterious. Sometimes, despite all odds, pregnancy happens, even in cases of diagnosed infertility. It's rare, but it happens. That night, Steven and I cried together. Tears of joy, disbelief, and hope. I didn't tell my family. They had lost the right to share in my happiness. 10 months later, I held my son in my arms, a perfect, beautiful baby boy weighing 9 pounds, 7 ounces. Steven and I named him Jack, meaning defender of mankind. As I looked at his tiny face, I felt nothing but pure love, no bitterness, no anger, no regrets. Life settled into a peaceful, happy rhythm. Jack thrived, and Steven was the most loving father. I had everything I'd ever dreamed of. We rarely went out, preferring quiet family dinners at home, but one night we decided to celebrate Steven's promotion at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. That's when I saw them. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But no, it was Laura, my sister, locked in an intimate embrace with a man who was definitely not Scott. They were tucked into a corner booth, but not well enough hidden. She was running her fingers through his hair, kissing him deeply, completely unaware of the world around them. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and discreetly took several photos. The lighting was dim, but the images were clear enough. There was no mistaking what was happening. Mary? Steven touched my arm. Are you okay? You've gone pale. I showed him the photos. That's Laura, I said, my voice low. With someone who isn't her husband. Steven's jaw tightened. He knew everything what Laura and Scott had done to me. "Are you going to send those to him?" he asked. My finger hovered over the send button. It would be so easy. One click, and I could destroy their perfect little family just like they'd destroyed mine. But after a moment, I shook my head and saved the photos to a secure folder. "No," I said quietly. "I'm better than them." A year passed. Jack grew into a bright, beautiful boy with Steven's kind eyes and my stubborn chin. We were visiting a friend in my old neighborhood, something I rarely did. Since the weather was nice, we decided to walk to a nearby park. That's when it happened. Just our luck, as we rounded the corner near the supermarket, there they were, Mom, Dad, Laura, and Scott, loading groceries into their car. We saw them at the same time they saw us. Their first reaction was to turn away, noses in the air, pretending we were strangers. But then their eyes fell on Jack, who was holding my hand and happily chatting about the toy truck he'd brought to play with at the park. Mom froze in her tracks. Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaky. I could have ignored them. I probably should have. But something made me stop. "This is my son, Jack," I said, my voice calm and steady. Laura let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, please. We all know you can't have kids. Which agency did you adopt him from?" I looked her straight in the eye, enjoying the moment. "I gave birth to him 4 years ago. No adoption agency involved." "That's impossible," Mom stammered. "The doctors were wrong," I said, cutting her off. "It happens sometimes. Rare, but it happens. And here's the proof." I gestured to Jack, who was watching the strangers curiously. Dad's eyes widened. "A grandson?" "We have a grandson," he said, stepping forward. Mom followed, her arms outstretched like she had every right to embrace my child. I stepped in front of Jack, blocking their way. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to throw me away like garbage and then claim my son as your grandson. You lost that privilege when you betrayed me." Laura's face turned an ugly shade of red as she saw our parents' attention shift to Jack. She had always been their favorite after they cast me aside, and now she couldn't stand it. "Oh, get over yourself, Mary," she spat. "So, you managed to pop out one kid. Big deal. I still won in the end. I got your husband. I gave him a real family, 3 beautiful daughters. Face it, I'm still better than you'll ever be." My hand was on my phone before she even finished her rant. "Speaking of family, Laura," I said calmly, "why don't you tell everyone about your extracurricular activities?" "What are you talking about?" Scott asked, his eyes narrowing. I pulled up the photos from the restaurant and held out my phone. "Here's your loving wife," I said, "having dinner with someone else." Though dinner might not be the right word for what was really going on. "I have to say, Laura," I said calmly, "most people don't kiss their dinner companions." The color drained from Laura's face as Scott grabbed the phone from my hand. Mom and Dad crowded around to look, their mouths falling open in shock. "Who is he?" Scott demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Laura stammered, He's just a friend from work." "Friends don't kiss like that," I replied coolly. "And they certainly don't meet in dark corners of expensive restaurants while their spouses are at home with the kids." "Laura, how could you?" Mom gasped. "After everything." "Everything?" I laughed bitterly. "After you helped her steal my husband? After you threw me away because you thought I couldn't have children? Karma's something, isn't it?" Scott and Laura were shouting at each other by then, their voices echoing through the parking lot. I turned to Jack, who was still holding my hand, blissfully unaware of the chaos around him. "Come on, sweetie," I said gently. "Let's go to the park." We walked away, leaving them to their disaster. Jack happily chattered about the slides and swings, completely unaware of the storm we'd just left behind. 2 months later, I heard the rest of the story through the neighborhood gossip. After discovering Laura's affair, Scott got himself tested. The results showed he was infertile and had been all along, which meant baby surely couldn't possibly be his. Furious, he left Laura immediately and refused to pay support for either Shirley or Angela. Laura ended up moving back in with our parents, her perfect life in pieces. Then the calls started. Emails. Even unexpected visits to my house. "Please, Mary," Mom begged through the door one day. We made a terrible mistake. Let us be part of Jack's life. He's our only grandson. You should have thought about that, I replied calmly, before you called me an empty vessel. Actions have consequences. Stephen stood by my side completely. Family isn't about DNA, he said one night as we watched Jack building with his blocks. It's about love, respect, and loyalty. They didn't show you any of those. He was right, of course. Looking at my little family, my wonderful husband who loved me for who I was, my miracle son who proved the doctors wrong, and our home filled with laughter, I knew I had everything I needed. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the one you're meant to have. Sometimes, you have to build your own with people who choose you back. I chose Stephen and he chose me. We chose Jack, and he chose us right back, with his first smile, his first word, and his first steps. That's what real family is. And I wouldn't have it any other way.